For this week, we're going to be moving into what we call parallel lines with a transversal. Okay, so notice there's two lines. I'm going to call those parallel. And I'm going to emphasize they're parallel with those arrows. What that means is that they go in the same direction. They will never intersect. Now, transversal is basically a line that crosses both parallel lines. For today, we're going to be talking about two rules. One of them is called alternate interior, and the other one is called alternate exterior. All right, let me explain what these are. So let me draw, let's say those two lines are parallel. I'm going to emphasize they're parallel with my arrows, and they're crossed by another line, so which we call the transversal. Now, alternate, because I see the word alternate both cases, alternate means that I'm going to be dealing with two angles, one on each side of the transversal. So one on the left side and the other one on the outside. That's what alternate means. Interior means in between the lines, in between the parallel lines. Exterior means not in between the parallel lines. So alternate interior, an example of alternate interior could be this angle with this angle. Notice how one is on the left side of the transversal and the other one on the right side. And then both of them are in between the parallel lines. So that's alternate interior. Alternate exterior, an example of alternate exterior could be this angle with this angle. Alternate different sides of the transversal. Exterior means not in between the parallel lines. Now, interesting part is that alternate interior or alternate exterior will always give me equal angles. So what I mean with that is, let's take a look at number 27. I'm looking at this angle with this angle. That's an example of alternate interior. Alternate interior, the angles are going to be congruent. The same thing for alternate exterior. Congruent, we used this word before. Congruent means the angles are the same thing. So I'm just going to say that 65 is equal to x plus 70. Remember, congruent means same shape, same size. They look like angles, so they have the same shape. So I'm going to say they're the same size, so they're equal to each other. The instructions are solve for x. All right, so let me separate my sides through the x, through the equal sign, let me separate my sides. I want the x by itself. So I want to cancel out this plus 70. I'm going to move it to the other side as a minus 70. Don't forget to switch the sign. If it was minus, switch it to plus. If it was plus, switch it to minus. On the left side, 65 minus 70, that gives me a negative 5. And this is equal to x. I have x by itself. My instructions are solve for x. Basically, I want to know what's the value of x that makes the statement true. There it is, negative 5. Let's take a look at number 28. This is an example of alternate interior. In alternate interior, the two angles are equal. So I'm just going to go 20x is equal to 60. Let me separate them to the equal sign. Now that 20 is next to the x. It's not separated with a plus or minus. It's next to the x, so that means times. The opposite of times is divide. So I'm going to divide by 20. So I get x is equal to 3. So the value of x is 3. All right, alternate interior, the angles are congruent. Now here, question number 29, that's an example of alternate exterior. Alternate exterior, the angles are congruent as well. So I'm just going to say 13x plus 9 is equal to 100. The angles are congruent. Let me separate them to the equal sign. I want to have the x term by itself. So the plus 9, let me move it over as a minus 9. Don't forget to switch the sign. So I have 13x is equal to 91. To get the x by itself, let me divide both sides by 13. So I get x is equal to 7. Instructions were solve for x. What's the value of x? 7. Let's take a look at number 30. This is another example of alternate exterior. So I'm just going to go 6x minus 6 equals 4x plus 16. I'm going to separate them to the equal sign. Now I have x's on both sides. I have 6x on the left side and 4x on the right side. I want to combine the x's. Personally, I'm going to move the smallest x. So I'm not going to say move everything to the left or move everything to the right. Move it to one side. All right. Personally, I move the smallest x because I want to avoid negatives if possible. So I'm going to move the 4x to the left. So I'm going to have letters on the left side. Anything that doesn't have a letter, I'm going to move it to the right side. So this minus 6, let me move it over as a plus 6. Notice I wrote them next to the other term that was there. Also notice the 4x, I switched the sign. And the negative 6, I switched the sign. Anything that you move, you switch the signs. All right, so now looking on the left side, 6x minus 4x, that gives me 2x. I was expecting not to have negatives. On the right side, 16 plus 6, that's 22. Now to get x by itself, let me divide both sides by 2, and I get x is equal to 11. I'm going to work up until number 32, because now on the last two examples, remember we talk about two parallel lines and a transversal. Now, in your homework, I'm also going to throw in lines that don't matter, lines that don't mean anything. So for example, I see I'm going to be using this parallel lines because those lines have to do with my angles. And then I see my transversal right here. I threw in an extra line, the one in the center. It is there just to be there. In this case, I'm dealing with this angle and this angle. That's what we call alternate exterior, right? Different sides of the transversal, so that's alternate. Exterior, they're both on the outside. For alternate exterior, I know those two angles are equal. So I'm just going to say 7x plus 7, it's equal to 6x plus 16. Remember, I use the word congruent. The angles are congruent. Congruent means same shape, same size. The shape, they look the same. They look like angles. The size, when I'm going to say they're equal. Let me separate my sides to the equal sign. I see x's on both sides. I'm going to move the smallest x to avoid negatives if possible. So the 6x, let me move it to the left. Don't forget to switch the sign. And this plus 7, let me move it to the other side as a minus 7. I want letters on one side and numbers on the other. So on the left side, 7x minus 6x, that's 1x. I'm just going to write the letter x, right? 1x. On the right side, 16 minus 7, that's 9. The instructions were solve for x. There you go. X is 9. Now looking at question number 32, what I want you to focus is these two parallel lines with this transversal. Again, there are angles or there are sides, there are lines that are there just to be there. I'm looking at this angle with this angle. They're on opposite sides of the transversal, right? My lines are actually rotated a little. So I see the angles that I'm looking at, one of them is on one side of the transversal, the other one on the other side. And these are actually exterior, so alternate exterior. So I know these angles are congruent, so they're equal. So I'm just going to say 45x equals 44x plus 3. Let me separate them through the equal sign. Let me combine x's. So the 44x, let me move it over as a minus 44x. I know 45 minus 44 is 1. So I have 1x equals positive 3. So the instructions were solve for x. What's the value of x? There you go. 3. So that's what we learned today.